Well, I'm a common mortal that was taken as a hostage by the Venezuelan regime. As Amalia said, well, my background drove me to the oil and gas business for almost 40 years, where I developed a career until reaching executive positions. But the world and the geopolitical context was, very complicated during these days, particularly in the situation of Venezuela, the country where I grew up. And I, developed a life, and met my wife, and and I also developed my love for arts, particularly music. So I went to the music conservatory since I was 9 years old, and well, I had that part-time job when I was in college. I was a musician, and but also I was pursuing my engineering degree. But the context of this issue and what Amalia described as my tenure in 1,775 days of captivity in a dungeon in Venezuela, beyond speaking about the details on what happened every single day, the situations of living in a dungeon in an underground, being subject to physical and psychological torture for in a sustainable fashion every other day, being deprived of basic things such as a proper nutrition. What drove me to in almost 16 to 18 months to have a weight of 100 pounds. So that is, in other words, when the system is designed to drive you to death in a very, very slow motion. And also adding the ingredients of the psychological torture, which in my opinion is worse than you are beaten, because your body reacts naturally to the beating, like putting a defense, and then you start feeling nothing. But the psychological torture, it's something that stays there, and it's and gradually start eroding you, not only psychologically, also in your moral. And when that drives you into some other subsequent situations, that becomes the true enemy that you face whenever you are in a captivity situation. That is, when your mind becomes your worst enemy. And your mind drives inmates into suicide because of 4 basic situations that are created by your own mind. Depression, anguish, desperation. So, and if I witness some of my cellmates saying, I don't see the light by the end of the tunnel, and I cannot stand this. So the only solution is to, finish. But it's all your decision, and that's what drove me to change or slightly move the direction or the perspective of my story into telling how I managed to survive. Because the base case scenario is, besides coming back inside a coffin or maybe committing suicide, so you come back to the normal society with a strong trauma. That is something that is also experienced by POWs, people that are go to war, or it's for people that are victims of a hostage situation like myself. So because adversity is something that every single human faces, adversity in different grades. But my takeaway and my message on that I documented later in a book that I recently published, 1,775 Days of Captivity, is that we can extract value out of adversity, obstacles, and challenges. You know, I went through different stages in my process. So obviously, you know, being captured by the law enforcement groups from a state is something shocking. Even when you're not, you're innocent of all these arguments or charges that I was facing. So I went into a shock stage. So that, you know, I see that this is a nightmare, this is not happening, or I don't know what's going on. So you're like, you use as a method, natural method of defense to avoid reality. But at some point in time, you have to face reality. And that is, you know, I would say the most important moment of any human facing adversity or any challenging situation. I use an analogy of the alcoholic. You know, the most important moment of an alcoholic is when this individual goes to the AA meeting and they say, please stand up. What's your name? My name is Jorge. And while you're here, I am an alcoholic and I need help. That is the most important moment of this individual. It's when you address and you acknowledge reality as it is. So, but the reality is one. It's only one. The reality is the reality. What makes a true change is how we address that reality. And that will make different scenarios. So we can address reality in multiple ways. When I went out from that shocking moment, I said, well, I need to address where I am and what I have under my control. And I started doing like an inventory of different items. So my finances, my family, well, I don't know how to contact my family because I was deprived of making phone calls, having contact with attorneys. So I was completely isolated from the external world. So I don't have any control of what happened with my family, with my finances, with my job, so with my friends. Conclusion, I have control of nothing but three things: my mental, physical, and spiritual health. That is what I am going to take control. And then that is, you know, the what I call the what. So this is what I have, what I want, and I need to do. But the next step was what I call my volition state or stage, which is the power of will. What am I going to do next? And I have two possibilities. It was a black or white, very simple. Or survive or not. So if I decide to go with the flow, I know exactly where it's going to be the end of the story. But if I decide to survive, so I need to, you know, have a commitment and make a plan on this regard. So, and I recall that in all this process, I was through, you know, all these nightmares in the first 11 months. When after 11 months, I was allowed to make a phone call for 2 minutes. And I said, well, I want to call my wife. That's, you know. And then when I was able to communicate, because for me it was an international call, when I was able to communicate with my wife, she took the phone and said, hey, honey, it's me. And she started crying. And I just started, honey, 2 minutes. So just, I need to know, how's the family doing? So how are you managing the economies of the house? What are you doing? How are you paying the bills? How's my son, my daughter, my mother? And she continued, crying and crying and crying. And honey, I have 2 minutes. That's only 30 seconds. And then she wasn't able to articulate a word because of that strong pain. And then from all of a sudden, I had a little touch from a guard saying, "Your time is over. Honey, it's done. So I need to go back to my cell." And at that moment, she was able to articulate a word. And she told me, "Please come back to me." And then I closed the call. And I went back to my cell. And then I started thinking about my decision of surviving. And I said, if I decided the what, that is, I want to survive, I need to find a why. So why am I going to do this? And the why in a survival situation refers to purpose and meaning. So what is the purpose and the meaning of my survival? Please come back to me. So then I said, well, if I was looking for a why, I now have it. But that why drove me into a commitment. So I reached an internal commitment of coming back to her, but as a better man, as a stronger man, as a better husband, as a better father. So, and I decided, and that was the point of volition. So, how I can manage, taking care of my physical, mental, and spiritual health. And the physical health was one important area, but not the most important. And then I went to the mental area, so that your mind could be your worst enemy. But how to control your worst enemy? And I did a couple of things. I did meditation, but not meditation to relax myself and try to sleep. I did meditation to get concentration. And it's the same type of meditation that you find in ancient cultures or religions such as the Brahmanism, Hinduism, even in Buddhism, that the meditation is the path via concentration to nirvana or Buddhahood or sanctity or wherever we want to call it. So when I started, I was familiar with meditation practices, and I started working on that. And I started doing visualizations and working, trying to visualize my family's faces, my house, but also I integrated music on this. And I started, in my points of concentration, trying to make music sound in my head. And I started with one of my favorite tunes, or my favorite pieces, that is Vivaldi's Four Seasons. And I started, trying to listening to Vivaldi's Four Seasons. And then I said, well, let me go one step ahead. I'm going to deconstruct this. I want to try to listen to the first violins, and then the second violins, and then the violas, and then the cellos, and then the upright bass, by the way, my instrument in the conservatory. So, and then I started going back to my years as a musician, and I wrote music, and I recall I started, trying to make the music sound, the music that I wrote back in the 80s, and particularly the ones with the motive of my family or my wife at that time. And I recall I started, recreating a tune that I wrote based on, I wrote for a recording artist in Venezuela. that was so kind to record my song, and it was a song that talked about how different we are, but the difference together makes something great. And I call this tune Air and Fire, in Spanish, aire y fuego. And it's because, you know, if you put air and fire in, you have fuel in a combustion engine, you get combustion and you get power. But I brought a guitar and I want to do it. It's easier to show or to listen. And this is Air and Fire. Aire y Fuego. It's in Spanish, but it talks about how different we are, but together we make a difference. Tus ojos van y vienen más allá del horizonte, se confunden en la inmensidad.